This is a short unit that hangs on the central theme of dignity, which arose during the study of a class novel. Therefore, this unit perfectly complements the novel, but is ultimately focused on maximizing students' use of language in order to express themselves in writing that packs an emotional punch for the reader. My starting point for this unit was the novel Trash by Andy Mulligan, which I'd studied with a second year mixed ability group. Now, during the last term in 2021, I had to adapt my plan for this group, moving their second novel once to third year, leaving me with poetry, drama, and speeches on their plan, which allowed me to structure this unit. Furthermore, the students had fiercely defended the dignity of the children, the main characters in the novel, and this was something I had to capitalise on, using that rich engagement that was evidenced through passionate classroom discussions and high quality written work inspired by key moments. This work really highlighted themes that were important to the students, including identity, dignity, discrimination, and the abuse of power. And this allowed me to further structure the unit, but also to choose appropriate texts. I opened the unit with the poem Rosa Parks, written by Jan Dean, which celebrates that iconic moment in history. The students learned the context behind that moment. They read the poem, made sure they understood the narrative running through it. Then they read again, analysed, and shared their responses to the language used, what the poet was trying to say, and how they said it. What was interesting, specifically looking at the cutlery metaphor that runs through the first couple of stanzas, was that no two students responded to it or read it the same way. As a poem, it's incredibly accessible, but layered in a way that presents a challenge for all students. We moved on to look at two short poems by Langston Hughes, Harlem and Dreams. A little bit of context was required here, but not as much as before. We only added on a little bit about the Harlem Renaissance. Again, we read the poems, made sure we understood them, and then we compared them based on the strength of their theme or message. This was something that the students engaged with on a very personal level, and their answers really focused on the tone and imagery used. As you can see, they're incredibly short, but there's incredible depth to them as well. Now, after a couple of days on poetry, we moved on to speeches, and mainly focused on the classic I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. This required a little bit of contextual information and a lesson specifically on persuasive language, rhetoric. It was also framed as preparation for CBA 1, so students were encouraged to annotate and evaluate the speech based on lessons that had been running since first year. This eventually led to them planning and performing their own chosen section of the speech. Essentially, they thought about how they could do it better than Dr. King. Now, I could have used this speech as a model to prepare a piece specifically for CBA 2, but based on student feedback, realised that that might be better left until they'd completed the last text in this unit. I closed the unit by looking at Caliban's monologue from Act 1, Scene 2 of The Tempest. I saw this as a culmination of the students' work on the novel, poems, speeches, and more, and expected them to apply the evaluative and performance skills that they'd been honing, as well as the specific knowledge of tone, language, rhetoric, etc., that they'd built over the course of the unit. Context was key here as well. The context of the earlier text helped, but we also learned some specific historical context that the character was written in. We talked about the modern context that he's now analysed in, as well as the character's own stated motivations. Students read and analysed the monologue, focusing on character. They evaluated the use of language. They again planned and delivered an extract from the monologue, hoping to outdo the original, before eventually planning, writing, editing, redrafting, and performing their own original monologue, focus either on betrayal or dignity. This was good practice for CBA 1, but also resulted in a wonderful piece for CBA 2. As a result, the student work was exceptional. The impact of discussions on rhythm, tone, language, and imagery was obvious, resulting in high quality work that had been clearly modelled on Caliban's monologue, but also, in some cases, the earlier texts too. Evaluating the unit, I could tell that there was a lot to be said for this approach. The order of text could be arranged and other text could be substituted, given the needs of a specific class. The learning was cumulative, and less time was needed to contextualize each new text. Dignity as an anchoring theme really helped too. Students encounter this all the time in CSP and other subjects, in addition to it being fairly unavoidable in the current cultural and social zeitgeist. Furthermore, using the text as basic models allowed students to get creative whilst being supported, and resulted in some of their best written work. Overall, I felt that students engaged incredibly well, got passionate about the texts and topics, and produced some of the best written work that they had in junior cycle English to date.